There is a face the 20th century made, and then spent the next 4 decades trying to understand. It is a face that smiles with a precision that feels almost engineered, teeth too even, eyes too bright, the whole arrangement landing somewhere between warmth and performance, between invitation and command. You have seen it 1,000 times. On billboards the size of buildings, on the cover of magazines that no longer exist, suspended in the amber of cinema, running, always running, towards something just out of frame. Tom Cruise. The name alone does something. It conjures a fighter jet banking against an impossible sky, a cocktail shaker thrown in an arc, a motorcycle at night, a man hanging from the outside of an airplane at altitude, grinning as if gravity were merely a suggestion he had chosen, for the moment, not to take. For more than 4 decades, Tom Cruise has been one of the most successful film actors in the history of the medium. Not the most celebrated by critics, not the most honored by institutions, but by almost any other measure. Box office, longevity, cultural saturation, the sheer stubborn persistence of his stardom. He is, by most accounts, an extraordinary case. And yet there is something that troubles the story. Something that sits just beneath the surface of all that radiance, all that forward momentum, all that carefully manufactured assurance. The contradiction at the center of Tom Cruise is not that he is less than the myth. It is that he has spent his entire life trying to become equal to it. And the price of that attempt has been, in ways we are only beginning to reckon with, enormous. This is not a story about celebrity. It is a story about a boy who needed the world to be controllable and became a man who could almost make it so. About what belief does to a person when it is the only solid ground they have ever known. About what it costs to run that fast for that long, and whether anything is waiting at the finish line. He was born Thomas Cruise Mapother IV on July 3, 1962 in Syracuse, New York. The name itself carries a weight of lineage, a Roman numeral at the end like a declaration of continuation. But the reality of his early life was almost the opposite of continuity. His father, Thomas Mapother III, was an electrical engineer of modest means and, by most accounts, a volatile and often cruel presence. His mother, Mary Lee, was a woman of resilience and faith, working at various jobs to hold the family together while her husband moved them from city to city, state to state. A nomadic itinerary that would eventually cover 14 schools in 12 years across the United States and Canada. Pause on that for a moment. 14 schools, 12 years. For most children, a school is the architecture of a social world. It is where you learn who you are in relation to others, where friendships accumulate like sediment, where you begin to develop the slow understanding of your own nature. Tom Cruise was denied that continuity almost entirely. By the time he had learned the hallways, learned which teachers to trust and which to avoid, learned 1 or 2 names he might be able to call his own, the boxes were packed again. He has spoken about this in interviews, always carefully, always with that characteristic quality of having pre-processed the pain into something more manageable. But the shape of the wound is legible anyway. The perpetual outsider, the new kid again, the boy who learned that belonging was not given but performed, that you had to walk into a room and make yourself worth, knowing before someone took your lunch or your dignity. And then there was the dyslexia. He has spoken about this more openly. The way words rearrange themselves on the page, the humiliation of being called on to read aloud and faltering, the grinding labor of absorbing information that seemed to come effortlessly to others. In another life, this might have diminished him. In his life, it appears to have done something stranger and more significant. It forced him to develop an almost preternatural sensitivity to the nonverbal, to faces, to energy, to the physical language of rooms and bodies. He could not always read the text, but he became, with remarkable early fluency, a reader of people. His parents divorced when he was 11. His mother eventually remarried, a more stable, kinder man who Tom has described with something approaching genuine warmth. But the damage of those early years, the instability, the cruelty, the constant displacement, had already done its work. What do you do with a childhood like that? Some people collapse inward. Some people become angry, scattered, unreachable. Some people spend their whole lives searching for the order that was denied to them. Tom Cruise did something different. He decided to become the most compelling person in every room he entered. It began, almost accidentally, with theater, He had been intending to pursue wrestling at his high school in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, but an injury sidelined him. He wandered into the drama department, and something happened there. Something that those who witnessed it have consistently described as unmistakable. He was not simply good. He was, in the language of people who spend their lives in rooms with young performers, lit. He arrived in New York at 19, with almost nothing. A small amount of savings, a fierce and somewhat desperate appetite, and a face and a quality that would very shortly make the entertainment industry sit up and pay attention. The early 1980s were a particular moment in American popular culture. The country was in the process of rediscovering a certain idea of itself. Optimistic, physical, competitive, unapologetically ambitious. Ronald Reagan had just arrived in the White House. MTV was rewriting the grammar of desire. And the movies were hungry for a new kind of hero. Not the ambiguous, morally burdened anti-heroes of the 1970s, but something cleaner, faster, more incandescent. Tom Cruise arrived at precisely the right moment. His first significant role, in Taps in 1981, already showed something beyond the decorative. He was playing a military school cadet spiraling into violent idealism, and the performance had a ferocity that surprised the film's seasoned co-stars, including George C. Scott and Timothy Hutton. Then came The Outsiders, Francis Ford Coppola's adaptation of S.E. Hinton's novel, a film that functioned almost as a talent showcase for what would become the dominant male actors of the decade. He appeared alongside Sean Penn, Patrick Swayze, Rob Lowe, Emilio Estevez, Matt Dillon, Ralph Macchio, and C. Thomas Howell. Among that extraordinary concentration of young talent, Cruise was not the obvious standout. But he was working. He was always working. Risky Business in 1983 was the pivot. Paul Brickman's film was, on its surface, a coming-of-age comedy. A teenager home alone who makes a series of catastrophic but eventually educational decisions. But what Cruise did with Joel Goodson was more complicated than the genre suggested. He brought to the role a quality that would become his signature. The deep, slightly dangerous earnestness of someone who genuinely wants to win. The famous scene, white socks on a hardwood floor, Ray-Ban sunglasses, a rock song, became immediately iconic. But what sustained the film was the intelligence beneath the image. Joel is not simply reckless. He is a boy trying to understand the rules of the world before he has to play by them. And then, 3 years later, everything changed. Top Gun. There are films that define eras, and there are films that define careers. And occasionally, there are films that do something rarer and stranger. They fuse a performer so completely with a cultural moment that the two become indistinguishable in memory. Top Gun, released in the summer of 1986, was that film for Tom Cruise Maverick. The call sign alone tells you everything about the role's cultural function. Here was the Americanite in a flight suit, reckless, brilliant, dangerously charming, ultimately redeemable. The film was essentially a music video in search of a narrative, and critics were largely unkind to it. But audiences responded with a ferocity that no one had fully anticipated. It became the highest-grossing film of 1986. It sold more than 100,000 Navy recruiting applications in its opening months. It made Tom Cruise definitively and permanently a star. But here's where the more interesting story begins. Consider what it means to become a symbol at 23. To have your face attached, not to a performance, but to an idea about what a man can be, what a nation can be, what the movies can make you feel. Consider what it costs to carry that, and to keep running toward it year after year, refusing to let the symbol tarnish. Most people handed that weight would eventually set it down. He never has. And the question worth sitting with is whether that is heroism, compulsion, or something that does not yet have a clean name. What is often forgotten, in the long shadow of Maverick's cockpit and the franchise machine that followed, is that Tom Cruise spent a significant portion of the late 1980s and early 1990s doing something that most megastars at his level of commercial success do not bother to do. He was trying to become a real actor. This was not accidental, and it was not merely strategic. The evidence of it is in the choices he made, particularly when those choices ran counter to the gravitational pull of commercial expectation. Rain Man in 1988, directed by Barry Levinson. He plays Charlie Babbitt, a slick, superficial car dealer who discovers he has an autistic savant brother and learns across the course of the film something approximating humility. The film won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Dustin Hoffman's performance as Raymond has rightly been celebrated as one of the great pieces of screen acting of the decade. But what Cruise does in that film is often underestimated. He plays vanity with absolute commitment and then watches it slowly dissolve. It requires a kind of ego transparency that genuine movie stars rarely permit themselves, the willingness to look small on screen. Born on the 4th of July in 1989, directed by Oliver Stone, this was not a safe choice. Ron Kovic was a real man, a Vietnam veteran who returned home paralyzed from the chest down and became one of the most visible anti-war voices of his generation. The film required Cruise to spend months in a wheelchair to embody not just physical limitation, but the specific, corroding bitterness of a patriot whose country has destroyed him. He was nominated for his first Academy Award. He did not win, but the performance changed something in how the industry perceived him. Jerry Maguire, in 1996, gave him his second Oscar nomination and arguably his most complete dramatic performance. A sports agent in professional and personal free fall, assembling himself back into someone worth knowing. The famous speech, "Help me help you." You had to mean it, and he did. Magnolia, in 1999, was perhaps the bravest choice of all. Paul Thomas Anderson's sprawling, operatic film about interconnected lives and the possibility of Grace-cast Cruise as Frank T.J. Mackey, a misogynistic self-help guru whose entire constructed persona shatters in a single devastating scene with his dying father. It is the least likable character he has ever played, and it is, in several important ways, his most powerful screen performance. There is a monologue in that film, raw, broken, delivered on the floor, that many serious critics still cite as evidence that inside the machine of Tom Cruise's star persona lives an actor of genuine depth. What this period of his career reveals is something important about his psychology. He was not content to be famous. He needed to be worth the fame. There is a difference, and the distinction matters. Worth for Tom Cruise has always been something earned, relentlessly, physically, demonstrably, not something assumed. This is admirable. It is also, possibly, the sign of a man who does not fully trust that he deserves to exist without continuous proof. By the mid-1990s, Tom Cruise had achieved something that very few performers in the history of cinema had managed. He was both a serious, dramatic actor and the world's most commercially reliable movie star. These two things are not usually compatible. The machinery of blockbuster filmmaking tends to flatten complexity. The demands of authentic, dramatic performance tend to resist the mechanical. He somehow managed to inhabit both modes, alternating between them with a control that appeared almost choreographic. The Mission: Impossible franchise, which began in 1996, represents the apex of this duality. What began as a big-budget adaptation of a television series became, over the following decades, something genuinely unprecedented, a franchise that got better with time. That grew more ambitious, more formally interesting, more physically audacious with each installment. That was driven not by studio committees or focus groups, but by the almost obsessive creative vision of its primary star, who was also, by this point, its producer. Cruise did not merely act in these films. He built them. He controlled them. And increasingly, he insisted on performing their most extreme sequences himself. He learned to fly planes. He learned to ride motorcycles at speeds that insurance companies refused to cover. He hung from the exterior of a military aircraft during takeoff. He scaled the exterior of the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building on Earth, without a safety net beneath him. He ran across London rooftops, broke his ankle doing so, and kept running, the sound of the impact audible in the finished film. He held his breath underwater for 6.5 minutes, longer than most trained divers manage, to film a single sequence in near total darkness. He has crashed motorcycles, dislocated his shoulder, endured injuries whose full catalog has never been publicly disclosed. Why? This is the question that his colleagues, his collaborators, and his audience have returned to again and again. The practical answer: that practical effects look better than digital ones, that audiences can sense the difference between real danger and simulation, is true, but insufficient. Something else is happening. There is a quality in Tom Cruise's physical performance that is not quite bravado. It is more intimate than that, more urgent. It is as though the danger is not the price of the authenticity, but the point of it. as though putting his body genuinely at risk is the only way he can fully convince himself, not the audience, himself, that what he is doing is real, and perhaps, behind that, a deeper logic. If you can control something this terrifying, you can control anything. If you can make this body do this impossible thing, you are not, and have never been, the helpless boy in the 14 schools. Think about what it means to use your body as the instrument of your own proof. Most of us manage our fear in quieter ways, but some people, and they are often the most compelling people to observe from a safe distance, turn their fear into performance. They run toward the thing that should stop them, and they keep running, and the audience watches, breathless, partly in admiration and partly in the recognition of something they understand, but have never been brave or reckless enough to attempt themselves. The question that lingers is a simple one. Who is the performance actually for? You cannot tell this story honestly without entering this territory, and it requires care, because it sits at the intersection of private faith, public behavior, institutional power, and genuine human need, a combination that makes easy judgment both tempting and inadequate. Tom Cruise joined the Church of Scientology in the early 1980s, introduced to it by his first wife, actress Mimi Rogers. He has remained one of its most prominent and ardent members for more than 4 decades. He has described it as the thing that gave him the tools to manage his dyslexia, to understand himself, to navigate the world. He has credited it, publicly and emphatically, with much of his professional and personal success. For most of the 1980s and 1990s, this was understood as a personal matter. Slightly unusual, perhaps, but not dramatically different from the various spiritual and self-help frameworks adopted by other public figures of the era. Then came 2005, and everything, as it is said, changed. The Matt Lauer interview on The Today Show, the declaration of love on Oprah Winfrey's stage, so physical, so uncontained, that it seemed to unsettle even the audience in the room. The video, later leaked, later seen by millions, of Cruise in full Scientology mode, laughing a strange, knowing laugh and describing his beliefs with a fervor that most viewers found, to put it carefully, unsettling. His very public and very vocal condemnation of psychiatry and psychiatric medication, including his televised confrontation with Brooke Shields for taking antidepressants after postpartum depression. The public response was swift, and, for Tom Cruise, genuinely damaging. Not damaging in a terminal sense, his career survived, as his career has survived almost everything, but damaging in a way that altered the cultural relationship between the man and the myth. The smile that had always signaled warmth began to read, for many viewers, as something else. The certainty that had seemed like confidence began to look, in the context of these interviews, like something more armored, more closed. What happened in 2005 was not simply bad public relations, though it was certainly that. It was something rarer and more revealing, a moment in which the private self broke through the public surface and made people deeply uncomfortable with what they saw. And here is where intellectual honesty requires us to hold 2 things simultaneously. The first is that Scientology has been accused, credibly and persistently, of practices that are coercive, financially exploitative, and damaging to individuals and families. These accusations come not from tabloids, but from courts, from former members, from investigative journalism of serious rigor. They are not inventions. The second is that whatever Scientology has done for Tom Cruise, whatever combination of structure, community, purpose, and identity it has provided, appears to have been, for him specifically, something he experienced as genuinely life-sustaining. The boy who had no stable ground found in this institution a cosmology, a hierarchy, a set of answers that did not move when everything else was moving. That does not excuse what the institution may have done to others, but it does illuminate something true about why a person like him would cling to it with such ferocity. What you believe in, when you believe in almost nothing else about your own solidity, is not available for casual surrender. He has been married 3 times. Each marriage has become, in the public imagination, a narrative, a story about power, control, coincidence, or cruelty, depending on the teller. The truth, as with most private matters discussed in public, is almost certainly more complicated and more opaque than the stories allow. His marriage to Mimi Rogers ended in divorce after 3 years. His marriage to Nicole Kidman, beautiful, long, apparently genuine in its intimacy, ended in 2001 after a decade, in circumstances that have never been fully explained by either party and about which speculation has never fully stopped. Katie Holmes, his third wife and the mother of his daughter Suri, filed for divorce in 2012 after 5 years of marriage. The proceedings were completed with a speed that surprised observers. The settlement terms were sealed. He has had limited public contact with his daughter Suri in the years since. This is a fact that has generated considerable criticism. About it, he has said very little. The silence on this point is itself a kind of statement. What it says exactly is uncertain. What it communicates, the sense of a man who has made choices that have cost him something irretrievable, is harder to look away from. There is also the matter of the body. Not the spectacular body of the action sequences, but the private body, the body that age moves through whether or not you are running full speed away from it. Tom Cruise in his 60s is, by any objective measure, a physical anomaly. He looks like he has made a separate, private deal with time, and yet the physics that he has spent a career appearing to negotiate is patient. The ankle he broke in London healed, but not without consequence. The shoulder. The various unnamed injuries absorbed in service of the image of invulnerability. There is a particular kind of person who treats their body as a resource to be consumed in the service of a larger purpose, and who does not permit themselves to account, in real time, for the depletion. The body keeps the score, as it is said, even when the mind refuses to look at the ledger. What would it mean to stop? Not retire, not slow down, but actually stop and be still and let the accumulated distance of all that running catch up with you? Most of us fear this in our own lives in much smaller ways. We understand, in our gut, the particular terror of what might rise to the surface when the forward motion ceases. For some people, the running is not exhilaration. It is the only viable alternative to a confrontation. With everything that has been outpaced, the years between 2005 and roughly 2012 constitute a kind of extended wound in Tom Cruise's career and public image. The sequence of events accumulated into something that genuinely shook his cultural standing. Mission: Impossible the Theories, underperformed at the box office in 2006. Not a catastrophic failure, but the first evidence of slippage. Then came the extraordinary end of his long professional relationship with Paramount Pictures, whose then co-chairman made remarks that were widely interpreted as linking Cruise's personal behavior to the studio's decision not to renew his production deal. A man who had been one of Hollywood's untouchables had almost visibly been touched. The films that followed in this period were uneven in ways his work had not previously been. Valkyrie, in which he played Klaus von Stauffenberg, the German officer who organized the assassination attempt on Hitler in 1944, was serious and reasonably well received, but felt somehow muted, as though the usual voltage of his screen presence had been deliberately, perhaps defensively, turned down. Night and Day was an attempt to recapture the light, commercially reliable charm of his earlier work, and it did not quite land. Rock of Ages, in which he played an aging rock star, was a curiosity, more game than effective, though not without its moments of genuine self-awareness. And then there was The Divorce from Katie Holmes in 2012, which arrived suddenly enough that it had the texture of an escape rather than a mutual dissolution. Whatever the private truth of what had happened in that marriage, the public optics were, for him, deeply unfavorable. He was approaching 60. The myth was fraying at its edges. There were quiet conversations in Hollywood and in the press about whether a certain chapter was closing. And here is where the story takes a turn, that is, depending on your vantage point, either deeply inspiring or deeply strange, or both simultaneously. He decided to run faster. Mission: Impossible. Rogue Nation, released in 2015, announced something. It was the sequence that everyone talked about. Tom Cruise, on the outside of a military aircraft, gripping a handle as the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the air. No digital assistance. Holding on, ascending. The image was almost too obvious as metaphor to be taken seriously. And yet there it was, a man in his early 50s, who should by the conventional logic of Hollywood careers have been easing into elder statesman roles and franchise cameos. Instead, strapping himself to the exterior of a military aircraft and going up. The film was a massive hit. The one after it, Fallout, was even larger. widely considered the best entry in the franchise and, by the estimation of many critics, one of the best action films ever made. The helicopter sequence alone, shot practically in real conditions, required Cruise to obtain a helicopter pilot's license. He obtained it. Of course he did. And then, after the long interruption of the pandemic, came Top Gun: Maverick in 2022. Top Gun: Maverick was a phenomenon. There is no other word for what it was. A sequel to a film made 36 years earlier, it became the highest-grossing film of Tom Cruise's career, earning nearly $1.5 billion worldwide. It was praised not just for its spectacular aerial sequences, but for its emotional intelligence, for the way it used the passage of time and the weight of mortality as genuine dramatic material. Maverick is, in that film, a man who has refused to grow up in some ways and been profoundly aged by life in others. A man who keeps flying because flying is the only language in which he has ever been fully fluent. The critical consensus, strikingly, was that Cruise deserved an Academy Award nomination. He did not receive one. The resulting conversation generated unusual heat, suggesting that the film had touched something in people beyond the usual pleasures of genre entertainment. It had touched something true. What had happened? How had a career that seemed a decade earlier to be in a long and dignified decline reassembled itself into something this vital? Part of the answer is craft. The man is extraordinarily good at his specific art, and he had continued to develop and push it even when the audiences were not as large and the cultural winds were not at his back. Part of it is endurance. He had simply outlasted the period of disrepute. Time, which erodes most things, had in his case worn the sharp edges off the public's hostility and left something more complicated, a reluctant admiration for a man who refused to be diminished. But part of it is something harder to quantify. Something in Top Gun. Maverick worked because, perhaps for the first time in his blockbuster work, Cruise was not running away from time. He was running through it. The film acknowledged that he was older, that people he had loved were gone, that the body capable of these things was on loan rather than owned. And in that acknowledgement, quiet, graceful, tucked between the aerial sequences, was a kind of honesty that his work had not always permitted itself. He was still running. But for a moment, you could see what he was running from. And that made all the difference. What survives a life like this? What remains when the applause fades and the cameras are put away, and the body, finally, will not do what you ask of it? It is too early, in one sense, to answer this question definitively. Tom Cruise continues to work. He will almost certainly keep running in some form, keep climbing, keep emerging from some combination of fire and physics with that incandescent, slightly terrifying smile intact. But we can already say some things with confidence. He will have given the world a body of work that, at its best, Rain Man, Born on the 4th of July, Jerry Maguire, Magnolia, The Ladder Mission, impossible films. Top Gun: Maverick represents genuine achievement, not merely commercial achievement, though that is extraordinary on its own terms, but dramatic achievement. The achievement of an artist who took his instrument seriously even when the world did not, and who occasionally produced something that reached past entertainment into something more durable. He will have been, for multiple generations of moviegoers, the closest thing their era had to the classical movie star, the performer who carried the weight of collective fantasy and made it feel, however briefly, like something true. He will have demonstrated, in ways both admirable and troubling, what single-minded will can accomplish when aimed at a specific, achievable goal, and what it costs in the surrounding terrain, the relationships, the reputation, the private self, that gets consumed along the way. And he will leave behind, at the center of the official story, the persistent shadow of a question that no achievement fully answers. What was all of this in service of? What was the thing he was running toward all those years? Perhaps the most honest answer is, he was running toward a version of himself that he could recognize. A self that was competent, unassailable, physically beyond reproach, philosophically certain, creatively validated. A self that no one could take away, the way so much had been taken away before. He had the language to name it. Whether he has reached that destination, whether it is even possible to reach it, is another matter. There is a version of this story that ends in triumph. The boy with the 14 schools and the words that wouldn't stay still on the page, becoming the most recognizable film actor on earth. The kid who nobody could hurt anymore because he had made himself into something too fast, too skilled, too determined to catch. There is another version that ends in something more ambiguous. The image of a man perpetually in motion, still running at 60, still climbing, still performing proof. A man for whom stillness has never been safe. A man whose greatest fear may not be death, or failure, or physical pain, but the moment when the world stops watching and he has to look at what is left. Both versions are true. Most serious lives contain both. The tragedy and the triumph share the same root system. In the end, what Tom Cruise leaves us with is not just a filmography or a cultural phenomenon or a cautionary tale about the costs of control. He leaves us with a question. And the question is this: what do we owe ourselves? When the self is the only home we have ever known, he built everything he built. Every stunt, every performance, every controlled and relentless public gesture on a foundation constructed in absence. In the absence of stability, in the absence of a father who could be trusted, in the absence of a word on a page that would stay still long enough to be read. He built it from fear, and he built it beautifully. And he ran through it at speed and asked the world to watch. The world watched, and what the world saw, what we saw, was not just a movie star. It was something older and more basic than that. It was the ancient human spectacle of a person making something out of nothing, of a life refusing the shape that circumstances had assigned to it, and insisting, with every sinew and every calculated smile and every improbable physical feat, on a different shape entirely. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, quite close to everything. He will keep running until he cannot. And perhaps even then, and somewhere in the distance, in the particular light that only the movies can make, the plane will bank one more time against the sky, and the figure in the cockpit will grin. That grin, that impossible grin, and for one more moment, you will believe that gravity is negotiable. That is the gift. The cost of the gift is the whole story. And the story, for now, is not finished.